Good morning. Everybody in the room, mute. Okay, good to go? Welcome, everybody. This is our 8th business broadcast. We've been doing these calls as a resource to provide valuable information to our business community. We know it's been a challenging time for many of you, so we hope to get you the resources you need to help your business succeed. The business community continues to move through different phases of the COVID-19 effect, and there is still so much for businesses to process. We encourage you to reach out to us or any of the other resources available to help navigate through the programs, regulations, or general business needs. We are always available to answer questions. Just a quick disclaimer. We want you to know that we are working to provide the most accurate and reliable information, but as we've seen over the last several months, so much is unknown and changing rapidly. We also know that each individual business is unique, so if you have additional questions, reach out to your lender, attorney, accountant, or other trusted resource to verify information specifically for your business. The purpose of today's call, so we began these at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic to help provide immediate resources and tools. We wanted to be able to answer real-time questions. We also will be using it as an opportunity to engage with our business community and provide information on some of the programs we are doing in our office. We will continue to utilize this platform because it allows you to ask direct questions and to give you real-time answers. Today's call specifically is to learn more about the PPP loan forgiveness application and process for those that applied and received PPP funds to assist in economic stability during the pandemic. We will also be talking about the Bank of North Dakota COVID-19 PACE Recovery II program, which is available for North Dakota businesses to apply for in order to continue to offset financial hardship endured during these times. We will review the major points of that program as well. So if you have questions today, please send us a chat through the Zoom at Ask Us a Question, or you can email us at businesshelp@bowmannd.com, and we will take questions at the end of today's presentation. We will also be doing a recording of today's call. You will be able to find that at our Growing Bowman County Facebook page or on our YouTube channel, Bowman County. Presenters today, my name is Taryn Dorr. I am the Director of Economic Development here at the Bowman County Development Corporation. We also have Dwayne Bowman with Dakota Western Bank and Christy Pagel of Dakota Community Bank joining us to review these processes and programs. So thank you for joining us today, you guys.
Good morning, Taryn.
Thank
you.
So first we will start with the BND CPR II program. I think that'll be a shorter portion of our presentation, and then moving into the PPP forgiveness. And again, please send questions as you have them, and we will address them at the end of today's call. So I will turn it over to our lenders.
Okay, good morning, Taryn. Thank you for having us here. I'm glad you put that disclaimer at the beginning because that kind of takes us off the hook for programs that are constantly changing, and obviously there's some confusion to them, but Christy and I will do our best job today as we can to try to explain, answer any questions, and to keep it probably as simple as it can be. The first program we can talk a little bit about is the BND CPR II program. They had the CPR I program came out a few months back, and kind of in conjunction with the PPP loans and also the EIDL loans. It was Bank of North Dakota's version of kind of the COVID disaster programs. So the current program that they're offering is the CPR II program, and that's obviously to assist North Dakota businesses impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And this program is designed to provide a buy down on interest expense accrued on eligible existing debt from April 1st through September 30th of 2020.
And I think it's important to note for people, Dwayne, because they don't necessarily know what the word buy down means, that it's not a loan program.
Right.
Some of the other programs they've had are direct loans with Bank of North Dakota or with your lender, and this is more of a forgiveness, they will reimburse you situation.
Yep, on your existing business debt that you basically have, whichever bank you're currently at. And I think actually even line of credits and basically any type of business that is eligible on that.
I didn't see any limitations with the type of debt if it's, for your business.
You can also, am I right, credit card interest is also eligible?
Is eligible. Yeah, it's basically just debt to shareholders and yes, yep. Okay, so the program eligibility, you need to be a North Dakota business or have a physical location in the state. Agribusinesses are eligible, but egg producers are not eligible. You need to be current on your term debt, working capital loans, and operating lines of credit as of March 13th, 2020. Obviously, they want this to be to a business that is going to survive. Have North Dakota operations, which sustained a minimum gross revenue loss of 20% from 19 compared to 20. So over that time period, believe, isn't it through that?
April 1st to September 30th is the time frame that a person would need to look at their gross sales. So you don't have to get complicated and include your expenses. Just look at your sales from that time frame. And also, if you're not up to date on your books, because this program does have a smaller window, the applications are due by the end of October. Depending on if you have an accountant or a third-party person that helps you with your books, that doesn't give you a lot of time to get end of September info. So they are accepting estimates, is what I saw. Not quite sure what will be the repercussions if your finals come back in and there's a significant change, but it's something to maybe not stress 100% about at this point.
Yeah. So basically that is the biggest, the only criteria, other than, like you said, need to be a North Dakota business and can't be an egg producer, but you need to just show that you've had a 20% drop in gross revenue during that time frame, as Christy mentioned, from April 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2020, compared to that same time.
That same time frame, yeah, in 2019.
Yeah. So obviously probably the restaurants, and there are some businesses maybe won't qualify. But certainly there are going to be some that are going to qualify.
Yep. And if you were shut down during any of those timeframes, it's probably going to be a lot easier for you. Some people who I visited with have found out that 20% is a kind of a hard number to attain. You think it was slow, but maybe things rallied a little bit. So that's the defining characteristic, that if you're unsure if you qualify, do a little bit of that homework before you reach out to your lender, because that's the criteria we need to know before we start helping you calculate your interest expense. And also, not to say you should have a rough idea of your interest expense. If you're only looking for a couple $100, analyze if that's worth your time or not.
Yep. And it's a very simple application to complete. That is where you're going to have a little bit of homework, is doing your books from April 1st to September 30th and calculating your gross revenue from those two time periods. But other than that, the application is a very simple application to complete.
Yep. And there's no fees for you as an applicant to do this program with a lender or with Bank of North Dakota. There's just a couple check marks on the application where they ask for your eligibility. There's a formula on the application to show you how to calculate your loss. Because what Bank of North Dakota will do is they're going to prioritize the credits they're going to take all the applications, prioritize the credits with the higher losses will get paid out first. So there's a maximum of $50,000 per credit. So that will be the order. If you're right in there at 21%, please understand that you might be lower on the totem pole.
Yep. Yeah, they've got a total of, I believe it's $50 million that they put into this program. So if none of that money, if they don't run out of that money, everybody that's more than 20%, or otherwise Christy said, they'll be prioritized based on the percentage of your loss. So the applications need to be in by October 30th. So the time frame is short.
It's a tight window. And I think I saw 5 o'clock.
Yep, 5 o'clock on October 30th. On November 2nd is when they will go through, and all eligible applications, as Christy mentioned, will be ranked by BND from highest to lowest percentage of loss in gross revenue as compared to that same period in 2019. BND understands that applicant may need to use a projection, as Christy mentioned, from that September 2020, if books are not closed in time to meet the application deadline. We talked about the next bullet, and then BND will notify the financial institutions the week of November 2nd, which applications have been allocated the buy downs.
I just want to point out one thing too. On the application, when a person looks at it, like Dwayne said, it's very simple. The only thing that might throw people for a loop is it asks for a DUNS number, a 9-digit number, a DUNS number, that you only need to have one of those or apply for those if you are requesting the buy down of the full $50,000. So if you are, looking for a smaller number, you probably don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, and probably in this area, I don't think we'll see too many that'll hit the 50.
The most of our average borrowers, yes.
Yep. On to the big show.
Okay. Next program, Christy, you want to take these slides?
Paycheck Protection Program. Bankers are loving this program. Please note our sarcasm. I guess the biggest thing, and this might not be in order, Taryn, let me find where we're at here. Sorry, I don't want to jump all around. I guess that's at the end of it. So never mind. Let's follow your slides. They did receive a new application. This came out last Friday, the 3508S. If your Paycheck Protection Program loan is less than $50,000, there is another form, a newer, more simplified form that you can fill out and provide back to your lender. There are 3 separate forms at this point. There's the 3508, there's the 3508EZ, and the 3508S. You don't necessarily need to know which one, but contact your lender and we will help you figure out which one you need to do.
And they aren't as bad as the original one that came out. The original one that came out was very complicated. It had you bouncing around from location to location. Once the 3508EZ form came out, that was much simpler. And then the 3508S form is quite simple. So do not be intimidated by the applications.
Correct. And honestly, visit with your lender, because a lot of the information we can probably pre-populate on the form for you with your SBA number, your lender number, your loan number, excuse me. Some of that information, if it feels a little bit overwhelming to you, it might not be as overwhelming to us. So I guess some other things to know about the PPP, there's been a lot of changes and it's hard to keep up. They extended the maturity date from 2 years to 5 years. If your application was in before June, if your loan was done before June 4th or June 5th, Dwayne, correct me on one of those dates, your loan was a 2-year loan. If it was done after that, it was automatically 5. If you were going to end up with a balance, touch base with your lender, because we can modify your loan, the residual balance, to go to that 5 years. Things are very easy to get changed. And the most important factor probably for PPP was they extended your covered period, which was your time frame to spend your funds, from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. So if you were concerned about, grasping for every penny of the rent and the expenses, and maybe you can just focus on your payroll, it's a lot easier to make your full loan amount go away if you spread that number out.
And we don't anticipate that too many are going to have balances left. That's certainly, some of them may have a balance left from the EIDL loan. If they did receive that, that cannot be forgiven. But once the SBA extended that to a maximum of 24 weeks, most businesses should qualify for full forgiveness. The other thing to note, a lot of the original loans were done in that early April timeframe. So they are coming up on their first payment according to the way the notes were set up at that time. But that, as Christy mentioned, that deferral period has been extended from 6 months to 10 months once they went to that 24 weeks. So really there are not payments due. We're starting to get some calls. I'm sure you are too, Christy.
Yep. And if you submit your application, you are automatically in a deferred status with your payment already. So if you get your application to the lender, and I think we actually as lenders can move the date because you actually don't have to do anything for 10 months after your covered period is done. So touch base with your lender if you're concerned about that in November or December, whenever your first payment was originally done, because we should be able to do some things with our systems to give you some relief to allow you time to get things completed. I don't really know why they went to 10 months after the completed period. That's, for some borrowers that can be into mid 2021. And I think with anything, if you can complete this information in maybe a timely manner, it might be easier on you as a borrower and us as lenders as well. I guess one thing they didn't really change, Dwayne, is they didn't change the categories of what you could spend your money on. That's been consistent throughout the program. They haven't added any new ones. It's primarily your payroll, as listed on the slide here, your salary, your wages, family medical leave, sick leave, certain health benefits, your mortgage interest, your rents, and your utilities. Some things that I've experienced with some borrowers is maybe an approach to keep it simple. If originally you were planning on relying on rents and interest to meet your dollar amount, now with that extended time frame, if you want to just keep it easier and use just payroll and maybe not have to provide copies of rents or lease agreements or your utility bills, some borrowers are finding that to be a little bit of a simpler approach. Less is more sometimes with these things.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. That's for once they extended that from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, most businesses are able to just use payroll. and they are going to need to provide those payroll records to the bank when they submit their application. So that simplifies it, though, if that's all they have to provide and don't have to provide the documentation for rent expense or interest expense, those other ones.
And most of those payroll expenses are things that are quantified by a third party and will maybe pass an audit test a little bit easier than some other expenses. Not saying they're not valid, but if you have a 941 or a third party payroll report, that is just a lot easier for us to even do our, double checking calculations off of, and less information, or it's information that they can quantify with your tax returns for audit. So I guess on this slide, kind of touch base on a lot of that. Yeah, December 31st though is the final cutoff date. So everybody be aware of that part of it for your expenses. 60% of your loan must be used for payroll costs. I think Dwayne and I have expressed our personal preference for try to use as much of it as you can for payroll.
That's the one change that I think we talked about last time, but that was changed from 75% to 60%. So that made it easier as well that you can use payroll.
The staffing requirements, that gets a little sticky. That's probably something we won't get into a lot of detail here because that's going to be dependent on your business situation. But the goal of the program originally was to keep staff. We do understand, and this happened everywhere, that there was staff that decided to maybe take advantage of other programs, or they took advantage of extra benefits and decided to just not come back to work. PPP is acknowledging that. There is some stipulations they have in there that shouldn't harm you or be part of, it shouldn't be detrimental. But a lot of the times the employer needs to have some things in writing that you might have offered employee A to come back in. And you need to have that in writing. And you also need to have something in writing from that employee that they refused to come back, whether it is a text message or maybe a letter, but they do need that in writing. So that is something that might be something as an employer. If you do know that you dropped a couple of employees, maybe work on getting some of that information. See if they'll jot you a letter or shoot you an email that they chose to come back for, or what that situation was.
Yeah, in this area, we were lucky. I don't think we had too many businesses that had let employees go. So I don't think we were talking about that before this meeting. We weren't affected as much as some areas. But if you were a business that did have to cut some staff, visit with your lender on that. There are some, as Christy mentioned, there are some safe harbor rules that can help with that. And you may be still eligible for full forgiveness, or if you were a business that had to be shut down by mandate during the covered time period.
Good. And some of the employee requirements are things that determine which form you can use that we talked about earlier. There's 3 applications. What determines what you can use? Part of that is related to your employees and if you were able to keep your staff and keep the hours maintained. So we can visit with you. That's probably something easier to address with an individual credit based on their needs than make it sound complicated and scary right now.
Yes, and if you were able to maintain all of your staffing, didn't have to let anybody go, and if you didn't cut any payroll by more than anybody's payroll by more than 25%, kept it at least 75%, you should be eligible to use the easy application.
And then documentation, you need to submit your documentation with your application to your lender so that we can, spot check things, maybe help prevent trouble later on down the road. It's going to be easier for everybody if we confirm numbers before, and then we have an error with SBA and potentially, something wasn't forgiven because of a common math error. So have your documentation for your lender. The accountants have been great about dealing with this and helping, customers with getting copies of their 941s to them or helping them with payroll receipts. If you don't have many employees, maybe you're a 1 or 2 person show, especially a single owner business, you actually don't need much proof to provide to the lender with your application. There was a webinar yesterday and we heard SBA say, if you're a Schedule C, we just need a copy of that 2019 Schedule C. We don't need to worry about getting copies of checks that you might have wrote yourself or showing transfers. That's something that has kind of changed as the program has developed. Because earlier on in the year, we had been told to have those trails, have that information. But I think they're just figuring out that it might be easier just to keep some things simplified.
And the documentation you do provide to your lender, you should keep that as well, but you will need to keep that for up to 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And as Christy mentioned, if you are a self-employed or a sole proprietorship, the application, the forgiveness application is very simple. You probably actually provided your Schedule C at the time of your application.
Mhm.
Yep, so you probably won't even have to provide anything. So the application is very simple. We will look at that application here at the end.
One thing on documentation, I know Dwayne and I both sat in on a webinar yesterday that SBA had, and they talked about documentation that the borrower needs to keep that might not necessarily need to be submitted. So some of that is information the bank is going to have, but as a borrower, it's smart to retain your own file. It noted on there to have documentation with your application. One of the things too it noted was documentation supporting the borrower's certification as to their eligibility, which that kind of made me go back to, oh, what did we have to have people attest to that they were eligible? So I think that's that proof that you were in business. You know, make sure you're having information from probably the year prior as well with your PPP information. Don't shred that tax return from 2018 just in case you need proof of something from the year prior.
Right.
I was just going to say, you guys have the links to all the applications online. This is the 3508S, that's the newest one. That application, if a person looks at it compared to the other one, it is actually one page that the borrower needs to worry about.
You want to go to that slide, Taryn, so that
Which one?
you can see.
There you go. So that's the information that I mentioned that like Dwayne and I were visiting about. We as a lender can help pre-populate a lot of that information for you as long as you confirm the number of employees at the time of forgiveness. A lot of the other information is found on your application that you gave us as borrowers, with the exception of that EIDL advance amount and that loan number. When that program first came out, we did not know as lenders that that was tied to PPP in any way, shape, or form. So when they started working on their forgiveness information this summer, that came as a surprise to lots of people that that would be netted out against your PPP loan.
Yeah, as Christy mentioned, we can help fill that section out. The section that the customers are running into that they have questions on are typically the dates, the date of the disbursement, and then if they use that 24-week period, then that's the covered time period needs to be calculated. And you know, there are date calculators out there online that you can use, but your lender can help you make sure you have the correct dates in. And then also the PPP loan number. It's probably on your promissory note, but you can get that from your lender as well.
This was the form that got updated. This was would have been probably the other form you'd have if you are less than, excuse me, this was sorry, I'm babbling here. The easy one. This is the one that caused confusion where you actually had to list your dates. And SBA is very particular about how they want this information inputted when the lenders are inputting it into their portal. If you only used, 12 weeks of expenses because you knew you could go more than the 8 weeks and you knew you didn't need 24, we don't want that number on there. Right. They want, it has to be the 24. So those are the kind of things, if you're not quite sure about it. Also, I've had questions about customers, if you are the single member, small business, or you had Schedule F income, how do you put your payroll schedule on there if you don't necessarily pay yourself? So that's kind of the questions that we can help people with when they're filling them out.
And the other section of the application that isn't listed on there, but it's just some certifications. Pretty simple, but if you have any questions once you're doing your certifications, you can ask your lender as well.
It's a lot of things that you are eligible and that you use the funds as you intended, attesting to just the truthfulness and the nothing was illegal with the proceeds. And on the back of each document, the second page on most of these applications too is demographic information. That's completely optional. So if a person wants to provide that information, when we're inputting these forgiveness applications, they are doing some information gathering, I'm sure, to help with anti-discriminatory and some other information, but not necessary. Each of these applications too does have like 2 or 3 pages worth of instructions that it doesn't hurt as a borrower to just skim. That's where it does have information on there that tells you that the borrower, you do need to keep your information for 6 years after the date the loan is forgiven. Some of that information is tucked in there, not easily seen, but.
So a lot of people are calling now and they are asking, when should they be applying? And I guess that answer to me really is, you can start now. For the longest time, we were going to tell borrowers to hold off a little bit. The government was working on trying to get some automatic forgiveness out there on loans under $150,000. Obviously, the Congress is having trouble agreeing on anything right now, so that has not happened. The forgiveness on the making it simple on the 50,000 and less is probably all we can ask for at this time. So we are saying borrowers can start applying. And like I said, the applications are not very complicated. There isn't that much documentation that has to be provided. So it is simpler than we expected, and it came out 2 months ago. Much simpler than that. As far as who needs to help on those applications, you can certainly talk to your accountant. If you're a larger employer that has an actual person in their department that does your bookkeeping, doing payroll, yeah, certainly they can help put it together. But some of your small businesses where you kind of wear all the hats in your business, you can either talk to your accountant on that, or maybe you've got the information that you need to provide. It's like I said, for the most part, it's basically payroll.
And also something to, I guess, point out is if you did have an idle advance, let's say you had a $10,000 paycheck protection loan and you qualified for that $1,000 idle advance, you will have to deal with that $1,000 idle advance with the bank. We weren't part of the process of distributing those idle advances, but that'll be the part that will not be forgiven. And you can work with your lender to see how you would like to do that, because that amount will fit into the SBA parameters of that 1% loan, those longer terms. So I know as an institution, we've started getting some forgiveness funds back. And if somebody does have that idle advance, we're visiting with them. Some people were maybe forecasting worst case scenario and want to just maybe make that amount go away and pay it in full. But there will need to be some conversations if you did qualify for one of those idle advances.
Okay.
I guess, sorry, Terry, one more thing. We don't have a time frame as lenders of when we submit these applications of being able to tell you as a borrower that we should know in 2 weeks or something along that lines from SBA. It's a portal system, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of rhyme or reason with how funds are being submitted back to the institutions. The first ones submitted are not the first ones being paid necessarily, so it's not in order or a lot of logic on our end when we've tried to figure out when the funds are coming back to us. So
the guidance we've seen from SBA, we expect forgiveness on them probably between 60 and 90 days. But as Christy mentioned, some of the ones we submitted have not been forgiven. Some of the earlier ones, some of the ones after that have been, and some of them have happened quicker than 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
Just a reminder, please send questions to the Ask a Question in the chat box. I have a question. How do you want the documentation submitted? Do you want it digitally? Do you want people walking all their documentation in? What works best for the business to give to the lender?
I think it's their preference. Personally, like our institution, we're scanning it all in and making it all be digital. We have to submit your application to SBA electronically. So we'll be scanning those things. I'm keeping all the information electronic and then giving my borrowers usually back their hard copies. So things are acceptable electronic.
Yeah,
borrower.
It's probably the preferred method. As Christy mentioned, we have to scan it and we have to upload that onto the portal anyway. So that's probably the preferred method, but it's whatever the customer's most comfortable with.
Another question here, and I know you touched on this a little bit. How will a lender handle the remaining balance due on the PPP loan after the forgiveness period is done? If there is a remaining balance, how will that be handled? Just a reminder.
Yeah, I guess every customer is going to handle it on a case-by-case basis. As Christy mentioned, we'll be working with them if they have a balance left from the PPP, or the EIDL loan advance that they received. That part is taken off of what can be forgiven, or if they have a portion that cannot be forgiven, then depending on when that loan was done, it might be the 24 months, or if the borrower agrees to go up to 5 years on it, they can do that. If it was done after that date mentioned, I think Christy said it was June 4th or 5th.
Call the first week of June to be.
Yes, yeah, then those automatically would be over the 5 years. So, and some customers, the balances are not going to be very large.
Significant, yes.
So a lot of them are going to want to just pay it off and be done.
Okay. Do you guys have anything else to add?
I think the one thing we've learned, especially a lot with this in the last week or two, is customers are very intimidated by the process of it. And I'm going to say very general because a lot of these applications, a large significant amount of them are smaller amounts. So when I say this, don't be intimidated by it. I've had a couple borrowers that have said, oh, really? That was all I had to do? And we want them to have that feeling because it doesn't, whatever you think might be the complicated factor, there's enough frequently asked questions that SBA has provided us with lenders that there's a lot more leeway than maybe we anticipated, if that's the best word to use. Regarding like the dates of your payroll and some other things, if you got your money but you made payroll the day before, there's ways to work around some of the things that people were concerned about.
Yeah, once it was increased to the 24 weeks, those dates and having to match up and trying to squeeze your 8 weeks payroll, maximizing that kind of went away once they went to the 24 weeks. So it definitely became a lot simpler and a lot more borrower friendly.
Okay. Well, if you guys don't have anything else to add, I do want to just mention a couple resources. The CPR II program is out on the Bank of North Dakota website. Just a reminder, those applications are due 5 o'clock, October 30th. If you feel you had a 20% revenue reduction year over year, that would definitely be something for you to take a look at. Might be a good program for you. PPP forgiveness, that is all out on SBA's website. You can find all the information you need there. I think they've made that website pretty easy to navigate, surprisingly. So please go out and check out the SBA website. If you have questions that you feel our office can help you with, please email us at businesshelp@bowmannd.com. Otherwise, walk in the door, give us a call. We would be happy to help or get you to the resource that you need. The NDSBDC also has a step-by-step process on their website for the PPP forgiveness app, and that is a very good resource for you as borrowers. So other than that, I want to thank Dwayne and Christy for continuing to do this, being willing to come in here and talk about it. I know this stuff changes a lot, but we are getting to the end of this and into the forgiveness phase. Hard to believe. It has been a crazy year, but we appreciate you guys coming in. I do want to mention, we have visited about the ERG grant from the Department of Commerce before, and it does look like there will be a second round coming out on that program as well. And so stay tuned on that. If there's nothing else to add, we will go ahead and close today. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you.